Jessamine Jones flinched as another peal of mocking laughter echoed through Porterville's general store. She kept her eyes fixed on her small list, trying to ignore the whispers that followed her wherever she went in this small Wyoming town. It was 1876, and while the West was supposedly wild and free, social constraints still dictated a woman's worth, especially in towns like Porterville, where appearances mattered more than substance. "Look at her dress patched in 3 places and not even properly," whispered Cordelia Blackstone behind her fan to Amelia Donovan. Their silk dresses rustled as they moved closer to get a better look. "And that bonnet, it must be 5 years out of fashion." Jessamine's cheeks burned, but she continued examining the bolts of simple cotton fabric. She needed only enough to make a new apron, nothing fancy. Her meager teacher's salary couldn't accommodate frivolities, not when her father's medicine cost so much. "Miss Jones," Mr. Peterson, the store owner, called from behind the counter, "don't you be mindin' those ladies. What can I help you with today?" "Just this fabric, Mr. Peterson, and perhaps some thread if you have the blue." Jessamine's voice was soft but clear, betraying none of the humiliation that coursed through her. The bell above the door jingled, and the atmosphere in the store instantly shifted. Even Mr. Peterson straightened up. Jessamine didn't need to turn around to know who had entered. The sudden silence, followed by feminine whispers and shuffling feet, told her everything. "Xavier O'Malley," Cordelia purred, moving toward the door like a cat toward cream. Xavier O'Malley was the most successful rancher in the territory. At 32, he owned the largest spread of land outside Porterville. His cattle operation employed half the men in town, and his word carried more weight than the mayor's. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and undeniably handsome, with eyes the color of a summer storm and a jawline sharp enough to cut glass. "Ladies," he nodded politely, but his gaze swept past them, landing on Jessamine's back. He moved through the store with the confident gait of a man accustomed to wide open spaces. Jessamine felt his presence before he spoke, like the electric charge in the air before a lightning strike. "Miss Jones," his voice was deep, a rumble that seemed to start somewhere in the earth itself. She turned, composing her features into a polite smile. "Mr. O'Malley, I hear the schoolhouse roof is leaking again." Jessamine nodded, surprised he knew about such a trivial matter. "Yes, the children had to move their desks 3 times yesterday to avoid the drips. I'll send some of my men to fix it tomorrow." "That's very kind, but the town council will take another month debating the expense," he finished for her. "My men can do it in a day." The tittering started again, led by Cordelia, so generous to help with her predicament. "Though I wonder why she can't simply ask her beau to assist. Oh wait," she glanced dramatically around the store, "she hasn't managed to secure one of those either." Xavier's jaw tightened. He turned slowly toward the women, his expression unchanged but something dangerous flickering in his eyes. "Miss Blackstone," he said evenly, "I've always found that those most concerned with others' affairs typically have the least interesting lives themselves." Cordelia's mouth opened in shock as quiet gasps rippled through the store. Xavier turned back to Jessamine, whose eyes had widened at his defense. "I'll have the men there at first light, Miss Jones." "Thank you," she managed, clutching her fabric to her chest. He nodded once before turning to Mr. Peterson to discuss a large order for his ranch. As Jessamine paid for her purchases and left the store, she could feel the stares burning into her back. But for once, they didn't seem to matter quite as much. The schoolhouse stood at the edge of Porterville, a simple wooden structure that housed 27 students of varying ages. Jessamine arrived early each morning to light the stove and prepare the day's lessons. That Friday, she was surprised to find Xavier O'Malley himself on the roof, alongside 3 of his ranch hands. "Mr. O'Malley," she called up, shielding her eyes against the morning sun. "I didn't expect you personally." He looked down, hammer in hand. "Good morning, Miss Jones. Thought I'd make sure it was done right." By midday, the roof was repaired and Xavier's men had left, but he lingered, examining the schoolhouse's exterior with a critical eye. "Your porch steps are rotting," he observed as Jessamine dismissed the children for lunch. "Yes, I've been meaning to mention it to the council. And the windows need new caulking before winter." She sighed. The council has limited funds and they believe a schoolmarm's needs are modest. Xavier studied her face, noting the resignation in her expression. They mock you for making do with what you have, don't they? For not demanding more. Jessamine looked away. Some people value different things, Mr. O'Malley. They don't understand why I'm content with simpler pleasures. Like teaching, he said, not a question but an observation. Yes, and books and music and a garden that grows what I need. She smiled a little. I don't require silk dresses or fancy dinners to find joy. Xavier was silent for a moment, watching her with an intensity that made her cheeks warm. That's what I admire most about you, Miss Jones. Your simplicity isn't a flaw, it's a rare virtue in these parts. Before she could respond, he tipped his hat and strode toward his horse. I'll send men for those steps and windows next week. Jessamine watched him ride away, wondering why a man like Xavier O'Malley, who could have any woman in the territory, would take notice of a simple schoolmarm like herself. Porterville had been established 20 years earlier, growing from a trading post to a proper town with the arrival of the cattle industry. Situated in Wyoming's rolling eastern plains, it served as a hub for ranchers and farmers from the surrounding areas. The town boasted a main street with wooden boardwalks, a small hotel, 2 saloons, the general store, a bank, and various other establishments necessary for civilized living. Jessamine had arrived 3 years ago, fresh from a teaching college in Philadelphia. Her father, suffering from a debilitating respiratory illness, had been advised to seek the dry air of the West. With no other family and limited options, Jessamine had applied for the teaching position and brought her father west. Their small house sat behind the schoolhouse, a modest 2-room structure that came with her position. It was there that Jessamine returned after school, carrying a basket of mending along with her daily groceries. Is that you, Jessa? Her father's frail voice called from his bedroom. Yes, Papa. How are you feeling today? She set her things down and went to check on him. James Jones had once been a robust man, a professor of literature whose booming voice could fill a lecture hall. Now he was thin and pale, though his mind remained sharp. Better, I think. I managed to sit on the porch for an hour this morning. He smiled at her from his bed. How was your day? The roof no longer leaks, she said, pouring him fresh water. Mr. O'Malley had it fixed. Her father's eyebrows rose. Xavier O'Malley, the cattle baron himself, came to the rescue. Jessamine felt her cheeks warm. Don't be silly, Papa, he's just being neighborly. Her father's eyes twinkled. I may be ill, Jessa, but I'm not blind. The man has been finding excuses to cross your path for months now. He's just kind, she insisted, though a small part of her wondered if there might be truth to her father's observation. Kind men don't look at schoolmarms the way he looks at you, James countered. He was at the Founders' Day picnic last month watching you organize those children's games. Barely took his eyes off you. Papa, please, you're imagining things. Jessamine busied herself straightening his blankets. A man like Xavier O'Malley wouldn't be interested in someone like me. I have nothing to offer someone of his standing. Her father reached for her hand, his grip surprisingly strong. You have everything to offer, my girl. Intelligence, compassion, integrity, qualities worth more than all the fine dresses and social graces in the world. Jessamine squeezed his hand but didn't argue further. Her father saw her through eyes of love, unable to see what the rest of Porterville clearly did, that she was plain, poor, and painfully ordinary. The following Sunday after church services, Jessamine was gathering her hymnal when Reverend Thomas approached. Miss Jones, might I have a word? Of course, Reverend. She followed him to a quiet corner of the church. I've been speaking with some of the town council members, and there's concern about the social education of our older girls. Jessamine frowned slightly. I'm not sure I understand. The Reverend cleared his throat awkwardly. Several parents, particularly Mrs. Blackstone and Mrs. Donovan, feel that your simple approach to life may not adequately prepare their daughters for society. They're suggesting we bring in a finishing instructor from Cheyenne for the older girls. The implication was clear. Jessamine, with her patched dresses and practical manner, was not refined enough to guide young ladies toward respectable marriages. I see, she said quietly, embarrassment burning in her chest. And what does the council think? They're considering it. Of course, your academic instruction is beyond reproach, but perhaps for matters of social grace. I understand, Reverend. Jessamine maintained her composure through sheer will. Please let the council know I'll accommodate whatever decision they make. As she walked home, her eyes stinging with unshed tears, a horse and rider fell into step beside her, Miss Jones. She looked up to find Xavier O'Malley watching her with concern. Mr. O'Malley, she nodded, hoping he wouldn't notice her distress. Something's upset you, he observed, dismounting to walk beside her. Was it the Reverend? I saw him speaking with you. It's nothing of consequence, she forced a smile. Just a matter regarding the school. Xavier was quiet for a moment. They're saying you're not fancy enough to teach their daughters how to be proper ladies, aren't they? Jessamine stopped walking, startled by his perception. How did you know? Cordelia Blackstone's been campaigning for weeks. Her husband mentioned it at the Cattlemen's Association meeting. His expression darkened. It's nonsense, of course. Is it? Jessamine sighed. Perhaps they're right. I don't know the latest fashions or the proper way to pour tea for a senator's wife. I've never been to a grand ball or learned to play the harp. And thank God for that, Xavier said with surprising vehemence. This town has enough women preoccupied with appearances and not enough concerned with substance. He offered his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. They continued walking toward her small house. Miss Jones Jessamine, he said, using her first name for the first time. May I speak frankly? She nodded, curious about the intensity in his voice. I grew up with wealth back east. My father sent me to the finest schools, and I attended parties with the so-called best families. And do you know what I learned? He didn't wait for her answer. That manners without genuine kindness are worthless, that a woman can pour tea perfectly while speaking cruel words, that the most fashionable ladies were often the most empty-headed. They reached her gate, and he turned to face her. When I came west, I vowed I'd build my life on something real, something solid, and that's what I see in you: authenticity. They mock your simplicity because they don't understand its value, but that's what he caught himself. That's what I admire most. Jessamine stared up at him, scarcely breathing. Mr. O'Malley, Xavier, he corrected gently. My name is Xavier. Xavier, she repeated, the name feeling intimate on her lips. I don't know what to say. He smiled then, a genuine smile that transformed his usually serious face. You don't need to say anything. Just know that not everyone in Porterville shares the Blackstones' opinion of you. With that, he tipped his hat, mounted his horse, and rode away, leaving Jessamine staring after him, her heart beating in a way it never had before. The town council meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday evening. Jessamine hadn't planned to attend. Her father needed his medicine, and she preferred to administer it herself rather than leaving it to Mrs. Holloway, the neighbor who checked on him when Jessamine was out. But James Jones insisted. You go and defend yourself, Jessa. I won't have those pompous fools deciding your worth without you present. And so Jessamine found herself seated at the back of the town hall as Mayor Fletcher called the meeting to order. Various town matters were discussed: the need for additional hitching posts outside the new dry goods store, complaints about the saloon's late hours, and finally, the proposed addition of a finishing instructor for the older girls at school. Cordelia Blackstone rose, elegant in a deep burgundy dress that must have cost more than Jessamine's quarterly salary. As mother to Louisa, who will be 16 next month, I believe it's imperative that our daughters receive proper social education. Miss Jones is certainly adequate for teaching reading and figures, but our girls need guidance in matters of deportment and social grace if they are to make advantageous matches. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room, primarily from the wealthier families. Jessamine kept her eyes forward, her hands folded tightly in her lap. And how much would this finishing instructor cost the town? Asked Mrs. Baker, a farmer's wife with 4 children in the school. We've located a suitable instructor in Cheyenne who would require $75 per month, plus room and board, Mayor Fletcher answered, consulting his notes. $75, exclaimed Mr. Peterson from the general store. That's nearly twice what we pay Miss Jones, and she teaches everything from abcs to algebra. The cost reflects the specialized nature of the instruction, Cordelia replied smoothly. And perhaps if Miss Jones had such skills herself, this additional expense wouldn't be necessary. The door at the back of the hall opened and heads turned as Xavier O'Malley entered. He nodded to the mayor and took a seat near the front, his presence immediately commanding attention. "Mr. O'Malley," Mayor Fletcher acknowledged. "We're discussing the proposal for a finishing instructor at the school, so I've heard." Xavier's voice carried through the room without effort. "Before you vote, I'd like to say a few words." No one objected. Xavier O'Malley employed too many of their husbands and purchased too many of their goods for anyone to deny him the floor. "I've been in Porterville for 8 years now," he began, "and in that time, I've watched this town grow from a dusty outpost to a respectable community. That growth hasn't come from fancy manners or fashionable dresses. It's come from hard work, practical thinking, and honest dealing." He stood now, turning to face the assembled townspeople. "Since Miss Jones arrived 3 years ago, our school has produced students who can read better, cipher faster, and think more clearly than ever before. My foreman's son couldn't read a word when she arrived. Now he handles my inventory records." He glanced at Jessamine briefly before continuing. "This proposal suggests that what our daughters need most isn't education, but instruction in how to pour tea and curtsy. It suggests that their value lies in their ability to make, as Mrs. Blackstone put it, advantageous matches." Several people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "I came west to escape that kind of thinking," Xavier said firmly. "Out here, a person's worth is measured by their character and capabilities, not their pedigree or polish. Miss Jones exemplifies the qualities that actually matter: intelligence, dedication, resourcefulness, and genuine kindness." His eyes found Jessamine's across the room. "They mock her for her simplicity, but that's what I admire most: her authentic nature, her focus on what truly matters rather than superficial appearances." Jessamine felt tears prick her eyes at his public defense. Xavier turned back to the council. "If you vote to bring in this instructor, you're telling your daughters that being genuine isn't good enough, that they need to learn artificial refinements to have value. Is that really the message you want to send?" The room was silent when he finished. Mayor Fletcher cleared his throat. "Thank you, Mr. O'Malley. Does anyone else wish to speak before we vote?" To everyone's surprise, Jessamine stood. Her heart pounded, but Xavier's words had given her courage. "If I may, Mayor Fletcher." "Of course, Miss Jones." Jessamine moved to the front of the room, conscious of every eye upon her. "I won't pretend that I can teach your daughters how to navigate a grand ballroom or charm a visiting diplomat. My own upbringing was modest, and my education focused on academics rather than social graces." She took a deep breath. "But I can teach them something perhaps more valuable: how to think for themselves, how to form opinions based on facts rather than gossip, how to value character above appearance, how to find joy in books, in nature, in meaningful work." She looked directly at Cordelia. "Mrs. Blackstone, Louisa has a brilliant mind for mathematics. Did you know that? She solved a complex equation last week that would challenge many grown men. That talent could serve her well in many aspects of life, including managing a household budget or even a business someday." Turning to address the entire room, she continued, "I understand your desire to give your children every advantage. But I wonder if teaching them to value superficial qualities might actually disadvantage them in a place like Wyoming, where practicality and resilience matter more than knowing which fork to use at dinner." She returned to her seat, her legs trembling but her head held high. The vote, when it came, was 7-4 against hiring the finishing instructor. Jessamine exhaled slowly, relief washing over her. As people began to file out, Xavier approached her. "Well spoken," he said quietly. "Thank you, and thank you for speaking on my behalf. You didn't have to do that." "I said nothing but the truth." His eyes held hers. "Would you allow me to walk you home, Miss Jones?" The evening air was cool as they walked side by side down Porterville's Main Street. Neither spoke at first, a comfortable silence between them. "They'll still talk," Jessamine finally said. "Cordelia and her friends. Let them." Xavier's hand brushed hers briefly. "Their opinions matter less than you might think." They reached her gate, and Jessamine turned to face him. Why did you really come to the meeting tonight? You've never attended a town council meeting before. Xavier smiled slightly. You've been keeping track of my attendance. I notice things, she admitted. It's a teacher's habit. I came because I heard what they planned to do, and I couldn't stand by while they dismissed your worth based on something as meaningless as your lack of frivolity. His expression grew serious. Jessamine, may I call on you properly? Sunday afternoon, perhaps. Her heart seemed to stop, then race ahead. Call on me like a suitor, exactly like a suitor. His voice was steady, but she could see a hint of uncertainty in his eyes, the first she'd ever witnessed from this confident man. People will talk even more, she warned. Let them talk. I'd rather have 1 hour of genuine conversation with you than an entire evening of shallow pleasantries with anyone else. Jessamine thought of her father, of the town's reaction, of the vast differences in their stations. Then she thought of the way Xavier looked at her as if he saw something valuable that others missed. Sunday afternoon would be lovely, she said softly. His smile was like sunrise breaking over the plains. Until Sunday, then. He took her hand, and in a gesture that belonged more to eastern drawing rooms than Wyoming streets, pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles before departing. Jessamine watched him go, her hand tingling where his lips had touched. For the first time since arriving in Porterville, she found herself looking forward to the gossip she would inevitably face tomorrow. Sunday couldn't come quickly enough. Jessamine spent Saturday in a flurry of activity cleaning the small house, baking her best apple cake, and examining her limited wardrobe for something appropriate. She settled on her blue calico dress. It was 3 years old but her best, with only one small patch near the hem that she'd carefully disguised with embroidery. You're fussing more than a hen with one chick, her father observed with amusement as she rearranged the flowers on the table for the 3rd time. I'm not fussing, she protested. I just want things to be nice. They will be because you'll be there, James said gently. That man isn't coming to inspect your furniture or your dress, Jessa. He's coming to see you. Jessamine paused, struck by the simple truth of her father's words. You like him, don't you, Papa? I've only met him twice, but yes, I do. He speaks plainly and listens well, rare qualities in a man of means. James coughed slightly, and Jessamine immediately moved to help him take a sip of water. More importantly, he sees you, really sees you. At precisely 2 o'clock, a knock sounded at the door. Jessamine smoothed her dress, took a deep breath, and opened it to find Xavier standing on her porch, hat in hand. He wore a clean white shirt under a dark vest, his usual working clothes exchanged for Sunday best, though he still looked more rancher than city gentleman. Miss Jones, he greeted her, his eyes warming as they took in her appearance. You look lovely. Thank you, she replied, suddenly shy. Please come in. Xavier ducked slightly to enter the small house, his broad shoulders making the space seem even more modest than it was. He carried a package wrapped in brown paper, which he presented to her. A small token, he said. I remembered you mentioning that you enjoy reading poetry. Jessamine unwrapped the package to reveal a handsomely bound volume of Tennyson's poems. This is beautiful, she breathed, running her fingers over the embossed cover. Thank you. Xavier, good to see you again, James called from his armchair by the window. Mr. Jones. Xavier crossed to shake his hand. You're looking stronger than when I last visited. This dry air does wonders, James agreed. Though not as much as seeing my Jessa happy does. Papa, Jessamine protested, her cheeks warming. They settled in the small sitting area, Jessamine serving coffee and apple cake. The conversation flowed easily from books to cattle to local happenings. Xavier spoke about his ranch, the Circle O, with obvious pride but without boasting. He described the new breeding program he was implementing, his plans for expanding his operation, and his hopes for Porterville's future. The railroad will change everything when it comes through next year, he noted. We'll be able to ship cattle directly east without the long drives. Will that be better for the town? James asked. For some, for others. Xavier shrugged. Change always benefits some more than others. But I'm working to make sure as many local folks profit as possible. As the afternoon progressed, James discreetly excused himself for a nap, leaving Jessamine and Xavier alone in the sitting room. A moment of awkward silence fell. "Would you like to see the garden?" Jessamine offered, partly to fill the silence and partly because the small room seemed to shrink further with just the two of them in it. "I'd like that very much." Behind the house lay Jessamine's pride and joy, a modest but thriving garden where she grew vegetables, herbs, and a few flowers. October had turned many of the plants brown, but late-season squash and hardy greens still flourished. "This is impressive," Xavier said, genuinely admiring the neat rows and clever use of space. "You've made the most of every inch. It's nothing compared to what you must grow at the Circle O." "We have quantity, but not this kind of care." He bent to examine a plant. "Is this chamomile?" "Yes, for tea. It helps Papa sleep," she smiled. "You know your herbs." "My mother had a garden. Smaller than this, actually, despite our large property." She said tending plants kept her grounded when society tried to carry her away on nonsense. "She sounds wise." She was. A shadow crossed his face. "She passed 5 years ago. That's partly why I came west. There was nothing holding me to Philadelphia after she died." "I'm sorry," Jessamine said softly. "It's hard to lose someone you love." Xavier nodded, straightening up. "Your father mentioned your mother passed when you were young." "I was 12. It was just Papa and me after that." They walked slowly around the garden, the conversation turning to lighter topics. Jessamine pointed out the special varieties she'd cultivated, while Xavier shared stories of his first disastrous attempts at ranching. "I thought I knew everything because I'd read books about cattle," he admitted with a laugh. "My foreman, Joe Taylor, probably wanted to strangle me daily that first year." "But you learned," Jessamine observed. "I did, mostly by admitting how much I didn't know and listening to those who did." He looked at her directly. "That's another thing about you that I admire, Jessamine. You're knowledgeable without being pretentious. You teach without making others feel small for not already knowing." The genuine admiration in his eyes made her breath catch. No one had ever looked at her that way before. "Xavier," she began, then hesitated, unsure how to express what she was feeling. He took a step closer. "Yes, why me?" The question burst from her before she could stop it. "There are so many women in this territory who would be better matches for a man in your position. Women with connections, with polished manners, with dowries." Xavier's expression softened. "Do you truly not see what I see when I look at you?" When she didn't answer, he continued. "I see a woman of extraordinary intelligence and character. I see someone who faces mockery with dignity, who gives generously from limited means, who finds beauty in simple things that others overlook." He reached out slowly, giving her time to step away if she wished, and took her hand in his. "I've known women with connections and polish and fortune. What I've never found before is someone who makes me want to be better simply by being herself." Jessamine looked down at their joined hands, her small and work roughened from gardening and household chores, his large and calloused from years of ranch work. Different, yet somehow fitting perfectly together. "I'm afraid," she admitted quietly. "Of what?" "Of believing this could be real. That someone like you could truly care for someone like me." Xavier's free hand came up to gently lift her chin, bringing her eyes to meet his. "Jessamine Jones, I am utterly and completely in earnest, and if you'll allow me, I intend to spend as long as it takes proving that to you." The conviction in his voice and the warmth in his eyes melted something long frozen inside her. With a courage she didn't know she possessed, Jessamine stood on tiptoe and pressed a soft kiss to his cheek. "I believe you," she whispered. The smile that broke across Xavier's face was radiant. For a moment, they stood together in the autumn garden, hands clasped, something new and fragile and beautiful blooming between them. The following week saw Xavier calling on Jessamine regularly. Twice a week, he would arrive at her door, sometimes bearing small gifts, a book, fresh honey from his ranch, once a warm shawl when the weather turned colder. They would talk for hours, discovering shared interests and debating good-naturedly on topics where they differed. On Sundays after church, Xavier would join Jessamine and her father for dinner, bringing supplies from his ranch's stores to supplement their modest meals. The three would discuss everything from literature to politics, James Jones clearly enjoying the stimulating conversation after years of limited society due to his illness. Of course, Xavier's courtship of the schoolmarm became Porterville's favorite topic of gossip. Cordelia Blackstone and her circle were particularly scandalized. "It simply doesn't make sense," Cordelia declared loudly in the general store one afternoon, knowing full well that Jessamine was in the next aisle. What could Xavier O'Malley possibly see in her? No dowry, no connections, and those dresses. It must be some kind of charitable impulse. Or perhaps he's after the schoolhouse land, suggested Amelia Donovan. It borders his property to the east, doesn't it? Jessamine kept her eyes on the items she was selecting, pretending not to hear, though each word stung like a physical blow. When she approached the counter to pay, Mr. Peterson gave her an encouraging smile. "Don't you pay them no mind, Miss Jones," he said quietly. "Some folks can't recognize real happiness when they see it because they're too busy chasing what they think happiness should look like." Jessamine thanked him with a grateful smile and left the store, only to find Xavier waiting outside with his wagon. "I thought you might need a ride home with those packages," he explained, helping her up onto the seat. As they drove through town, Jessamine was acutely aware of the stares and whispers that followed them. "They're talking about us," she said softly. "Let them," Xavier replied, unconcerned. "Gives them something to do. Doesn't it bother you what they're saying?" He glanced at her. "What are they saying? That you must have ulterior motives, that you couldn't possibly be interested in someone like me without some hidden agenda." Xavier's hands tightened on the reins. "And do you believe that?" "No," Jessamine answered honestly, "but sometimes their words make me doubt myself even when I don't doubt you." He pulled the wagon to a stop at the edge of town, turning to face her fully. "Jessamine, I need you to hear me clearly. I don't give a damn what Cordelia Blackstone or anyone else in this town thinks about us. The only opinion that matters to me is yours." His eyes held hers intently. "They mock your simplicity because they don't understand its value. But that's what I love most about you, your genuine heart, your clear vision, your ability to find joy in things that truly matter." Jessamine's breath caught. "Love?" Xavier's expression softened. "Yes, love, I love you, Jessamine Jones. I've been falling in love with you since the first time I saw you teaching those children with such patience and passion. I've been falling deeper every day since." Tears welled in her eyes. "I love you too," she whispered, "so much that it frightens me sometimes." "Don't be frightened," he said, gently wiping away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "Whatever comes, we'll face it together." In that moment, sitting in a wagon at the edge of town with the man she loved, Jessamine felt truly beautiful for the first time in her life, not because of her appearance or possessions, but because of how she was seen through Xavier's eyes. Winter descended on Porterville with a vengeance that year. By early December, snow blanketed the town and surrounding countryside, turning the landscape into a pristine white expanse. The cold brought new challenges for Jessamine. The schoolhouse was difficult to heat properly, requiring her to arrive even earlier each morning to build up the fire. Her father's health deteriorated with the changing weather, his cough growing more persistent despite the medicines prescribed by Dr. Matthews. Xavier's visits continued despite the harsh conditions. He often arrived with his sleigh loaded with firewood, provisions, and warm buffalo robes. On particularly bitter evenings, he would insist on staying late to ensure the house remained warm through the night, sleeping on the small sofa in their sitting room rather than risking the treacherous ride back to his ranch. It was during one such evening, with a blizzard howling outside and James having retired early, that Xavier broached the subject that had been on his mind. "Jessamine," he began, watching her mend a tear in one of her students' mittens by lamplight, "I've been thinking about our future." She looked up, her needle pausing mid-stitch. "Oh, this weather isn't good for your father. Dr. Matthews says he needs constant warmth and better nutrition to strengthen his lungs." Jessamine sighed. "I know I'm doing everything I can, but I know you are," Xavier interrupted gently. "That's not what I meant. I'm not criticizing. I'm suggesting a solution." He moved from his chair to kneel before her, taking her hands in his. "The main house at the Circle O has 6 bedrooms. It's solidly built with fireplaces in every room and a kitchen that's always warm. There's a garden plot that's 3 times the size of yours, protected from the north winds by the barn. Her heart began to race as she realized where he was heading. "Marry me, Jessamine," he said, his voice low and earnest. "Let me bring you and your father to live at the ranch where I can care for you both properly." Tears sprang to her eyes. "Xavier, I know it's sudden," he continued quickly, "and I know the traditional thing would be to court you longer, but your father's health won't wait for tradition. Marry me now before winter deepens. Say you'll be my wife." Jessamine looked into his face, seeing nothing but sincerity and love. "But what about my teaching? The children need me. The school term ends for Christmas in 2 weeks. We could marry then, and you could finish the year commuting from the ranch if you wish, or we could find a replacement. There are always teachers looking for positions." She thought of her father, shivering despite the blankets piled on his bed, of the drafty schoolhouse and her small, cold home. "Yes," she whispered, then more firmly, "yes, I'll marry you." The joy that transformed Xavier's face made her heart swell. He pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a tender passion that made her forget the cold, forget her worries, forget everything but the man who loved her. When they finally parted, Xavier rested his forehead against hers. "We'll tell your father in the morning," he murmured. "And then the town, though I suspect they've been expecting this announcement for some time." Jessamine laughed softly. "They'll say you're making a terrible mistake." "Then they're fools," Xavier replied simply, "because I'm the luckiest man in Wyoming territory." News of their engagement spread through Porterville like wildfire. Most reactions were positive. Mr. Peterson beamed when they told him. Mayor Fletcher offered hearty congratulations, and Jessamine's students were excited by the prospect of visiting their teacher at the famous Circle O Ranch. Not everyone was pleased, of course. Cordelia Blackstone made a point of crossing the street to avoid Jessamine, and several of the town's more socially ambitious young women regarded her with barely concealed envy and resentment. The wedding was set for December 23rd, just before Christmas. It would be a simple ceremony at the church, followed by a reception at the town hall. Despite Xavier's wealth, Jessamine insisted on simplicity, and he happily agreed. "The only thing that matters is that we're married at the end of it," he told her. "The rest is just window dressing." As the date approached, unexpected packages began arriving for Jessamine. First came a large box from Cheyenne containing yards of exquisite ivory silk and fine lace. A note in Xavier's handwriting read simply, "For your wedding dress if you wish, if not, use it for curtains. It's your choice." The gesture brought tears to her eyes, not because of the expensive fabric, but because he'd given her the choice rather than assuming she'd want a grand dress. She decided to use some of the silk for a simple but elegant wedding gown, enlisting the help of Mrs. Taylor, her foreman's wife, who was skilled with a needle. The result was a dress that reflected Jessamine perfectly beautiful without being ostentatious, well-made but not showy. 2 days before the wedding, Xavier arrived with his sleigh to transport Jessamine and James to the Circle O. "The doctor thinks your father shouldn't risk staying in town with this cold snap coming," he explained. "And this way you can see your new home before the wedding." The journey to the ranch took nearly an hour, the sleigh cutting through fresh snow as they traveled west of town. As they crested a rise, the Circle O came into view, a sprawling main house of hewn logs and stone, surrounded by barns, corrals, and bunkhouses for the ranch hands. Smoke rose from multiple chimneys, and warm lights glowed from the windows. "It's beautiful," Jessamine breathed, taking in the scene. "It's home," Xavier said simply, reaching over to squeeze her hand. James Jones, bundled in blankets beside them, looked more animated than he had in weeks. "Magnificent, my boy, absolutely magnificent." As they pulled up to the house, the front door opened, and a stout, gray-haired woman emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. "That's Mrs. Connolly," Xavier explained. "She's been my housekeeper since I built this place. Irish as they come and stubborn as a mule, but the best cook this side of the Mississippi." Mrs. Connolly helped them get James settled in a large, warm bedroom on the first floor, close to the kitchen and main living areas, so he wouldn't have to manage stairs. The room had clearly been prepared with care: extra blankets, a writing desk stocked with paper and pens, and shelves filled with books. I had Joe bring over your books from town, Xavier explained when James expressed delight at seeing his beloved volumes. Thought you might want your old friends around you. While James rested, Xavier showed Jessamine around what would soon be her home. The house was larger than any she'd ever lived in, with spacious rooms, solid furniture, and surprisingly tasteful touches throughout. One room in particular made her gasp, a library with floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with books. This was the first room I completed, Xavier admitted. Built the shelves myself. Reading got me through some lonely years out here. Jessamine ran her fingers along the spines, recognizing classics, history volumes, and practical guides to ranching and agriculture. It's wonderful, she said sincerely. It's yours now, he replied. All of it. The night before their wedding, Jessamine sat with her father in his new room at the Circle O. James looked better than he had in months, the warm, dry air and excellent food already having a visible effect on his condition. Are you happy, Jessa? He asked, watching her face in the lamplight. Yes, Papa, happier than I ever thought possible. Good. He reached for her hand. Your mother would be so proud of the woman you've become. Tears filled her eyes. I wish she could be here tomorrow. She'll be watching, James assured her. And she'll see what I see, her beautiful daughter, marrying a man who treasures her exactly as she is. The wedding day dawned clear and cold, the December sun casting diamond-like sparkles across the snow-covered landscape. Xavier had arranged for sleighs to transport guests from town to the church, and then to the Circle O, where they had decided to hold the reception instead of the town hall. Jessamine prepared in the small room behind the church, assisted by Mrs. Taylor and Sophie Miller, a former student who now worked as her assistant at the school. Her dress of ivory silk was simple but becoming, with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Her hair was arranged in a soft style, adorned with small white flowers from Mrs. Connolly's indoor garden. You look beautiful, Miss Jones, Sophie said, her young face earnest. Thank you, dear. Jessamine smoothed the silk nervously. Is the church full? Mrs. Taylor chuckled. Packed to the rafters, half the territories turned out to see Xavier O'Malley get married. A knock at the door revealed Mr. Peterson, who had offered to escort Jessamine down the aisle in her father's stead, as James wasn't strong enough to stand that long. Ready, Miss Jones? He asked kindly. Your groom's waiting, and if his pacing wears a hole in the church floor, Reverend Thomas will have my hide. Jessamine took a deep breath, nodded, and placed her hand on Mr. Peterson's arm. The small church was indeed full to capacity. As the music began and Jessamine walked down the aisle, she was aware of the many eyes upon her, but she saw only Xavier waiting at the altar. He wore a formal black suit, his usually tousled hair neatly combed, his face solemn until he saw her, then his expression transformed into one of such naked adoration that whispers rippled through the congregation. James Jones sat in the front pew, his eyes shining with tears and pride as his daughter approached. When Mr. Peterson placed Jessamine's hand in Xavier's, the rancher squeezed it gently, his thumb rubbing reassuringly across her knuckles. Dearly beloved, Reverend Thomas began, his voice carrying through the hushed church. We are gathered here today in the sight of God to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. They exchanged simple gold bands and traditional vows, their voices clear and certain. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Xavier's kiss was gentle but promised much more, causing several throat clearings among the older parishioners and giggles from Jessamine's students. As they turned to face the congregation as Mr. and Mrs. Xavier O'Malley, Jessamine caught sight of Cordelia Blackstone's face, a mixture of disbelief and grudging admiration. Beside her, Louisa Blackstone was beaming, genuinely happy for her teacher. The contrast between mother and daughter made Jessamine smile. The reception at the Circle O was more lavish than Jessamine had expected, despite her insistence on simplicity. The great room of the main house had been transformed with evergreen boughs, red ribbons, and dozens of candles. Tables groaned with food prepared by Mrs. Connolly and her hastily assembled team of helpers. Musicians played lively tunes while ranch hands and townspeople alike filled their plates and offered congratulations to the newlyweds. Xavier kept Jessamine close to his side throughout, his hand often finding hers or resting gently at the small of her back. When they danced, his eyes never left her face, as if memorizing every detail of this day. "Are you happy, Mrs. O'Malley?" he asked softly as they waltzed. The name sent a thrill through her. "More than I can say," she answered truthfully. "And you? I've never known such happiness." He pulled her slightly closer than was strictly proper, "and this is just the beginning." As the afternoon wore on, Jessamine noticed her father tiring, though he insisted he was fine. Xavier noticed too and discreetly arranged for James to be escorted to his room for rest. Before retiring, James embraced his daughter and new son-in-law. "Take care of each other," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "That's all that matters in this world." By evening, most of the guests had departed, returning to town in the sleighs before darkness made travel difficult. As the last vehicle disappeared down the drive, Xavier turned to his wife. "Alone at last," he murmured, drawing her into his arms. Jessamine felt a flutter of nerves and anticipation. This man was her husband now, this house her home. The reality of it seemed both wondrous and overwhelming. Reading her expression, Xavier pressed a kiss to her forehead. "We have all the time in the world, my love. Nothing need happen tonight that you're not ready for." His consideration made her love him even more. "I am ready," she assured him, "just a little nervous." "As am I," he admitted with a smile. "It's been a long time since I've been this close to someone, and never to someone who mattered as much as you." Hand in hand, they walked upstairs to the master bedroom, now their bedroom. The large four-poster bed had been turned down, a fire blazed in the fireplace, and a bottle of champagne waited in a silver bucket. "Mrs. Connolly's doing," Xavier explained with a slight blush. "She has romantic notions beneath that stern exterior." Jessamine laughed, some of her tension easing. "She's a wise woman." As the night deepened, husband and wife discovered each other with tenderness and growing passion. Xavier's hands and lips were gentle, his patience infinite as he guided Jessamine through her first experience of physical love. For her part, Jessamine found courage in Xavier's obvious adoration, her natural reserve giving way to genuine desire. Afterward, lying in her husband's arms, Jessamine felt a sense of completion she'd never known before. "I never thought I could be this happy," she whispered against his chest. Xavier's arms tightened around her. "This is only the beginning, my love, only the beginning." Winter gradually gave way to spring. The snows melted, revealing the first green shoots of new life across the Circle O's vast acreage. Jessamine had settled into her role as mistress of the ranch with surprising ease. She and Mrs. Connolly had developed a comfortable working relationship, dividing the household responsibilities according to their respective strengths. The ranch hands, initially shy around their boss's new wife, had warmed to her genuine interest in their work and her lack of airs. Jessamine had continued teaching through the winter and spring terms, riding to town each day with Xavier or one of the ranch hands. Her students had noticed the change in their teacher, not just the new name and the wedding ring, but the quiet confidence that came from being truly loved and valued. James Jones thrived in his new surroundings. While still frail, his coughing fits had decreased dramatically, and he'd gained weight thanks to Mrs. Connolly's determined feeding. He spent his days reading in the library, writing long neglected correspondence, and when weather permitted, sitting on the wide porch observing the ranch activities. By May, as the wildflowers carpeted the plains and new calves wobbled alongside their mothers in the pastures, Jessamine had news to share with her husband. She chose a quiet evening when they were alone in the library, Xavier reviewing cattle records while she corrected her students' compositions. "Xavier," she began, setting aside her work, "I have something to tell you." He looked up, immediately attentive. "What is it, love? I visited Dr. Matthews today while I was in town." She took a deep breath. "We're going to have a baby in November." Xavier's face went blank with shock for a moment before breaking into a smile of such radiant joy that Jessamine's eyes filled with tears. He was across the room in an instant, kneeling before her chair and gathering her into his arms. A baby, he repeated, voice thick with emotion. Our baby. Jessamine nodded, smiling through her tears. Are you happy? Happy doesn't begin to describe it. He laid a gentle hand on her still flat stomach. Our child, a little piece of both of us. They shared the news with James the next morning. The older man's reaction was one of pure delight. A grandchild, he said wonderingly. I never thought I'd live to see the day. Well, you'd better plan on sticking around, Xavier told him firmly. This child will need their grandfather's stories and wisdom, Mrs. Connolly, informed shortly after, immediately began planning improvements to Jessamine's diet and reviewing the unused nursery adjacent to the master bedroom. The news spread quickly throughout the ranch, with the hands offering awkward but sincere congratulations to their boss and his wife. Word reached Porterville within days. The reactions were mixed, as always. Most people expressed genuine pleasure at the news, particularly Jessamine's students and their parents, but the Blackstone Circle could not resist a few barbed comments. Well, at least we know why he married her now, Cordelia remarked loudly enough to be overheard at church. He needed an heir for that big ranch, and she trapped him nicely. The words reached Jessamine's ears as she arranged him books after the service. She stiffened but said nothing, determined not to give Cordelia the satisfaction of her response. To her surprise, it was Louisa Blackstone who spoke up. Mother, that's unkind and untrue. Mr. and Mrs. O'Malley were married months before she became expecting. And anyone with eyes can see how much he loves her. Cordelia turned to her daughter in shock. Louisa, mind your place. I am minding my place, the girl responded calmly. Miss Jones, Mrs. O'Malley now taught me that a lady speaks truth and shows kindness. I'm simply following her example. With that, Louisa crossed the church to where Jessamine stood. Congratulations, Mrs. O'Malley. I'm very happy for you and Mr. O'Malley. Jessamine embraced her former student, tears threatening. Thank you, Louisa. That means a great deal to me. As the girl returned to her stunned mother, Xavier appeared at Jessamine's side. Everything all right? He asked, having missed the exchange. Yes, Jessamine replied, watching Louisa walk away with newfound pride and poise. Everything is perfect. As her pregnancy progressed, Jessamine made the difficult decision to resign from her teaching position for the coming school year. The baby will arrive in November, and I can't imagine leaving a newborn to return to the classroom, she explained to Mayor Fletcher and the school board. Perhaps in a year or two I might consider teaching again, but for now my place will be at home. The board accepted her resignation with regret but understanding, immediately beginning the search for a replacement. To Jessamine's delight, Sophie Miller, her young assistant, was considered for the position despite her age of just 19. She has a natural gift for teaching, Jessamine advocated passionately, and the children already know and respect her. By the end of July, Sophie was officially appointed as Porterville's new teacher, with Jessamine agreeing to mentor her through the fall term until the baby's arrival. Summer on the Circle O was a busy time. Cattle needed moving to higher pastures, hay required cutting and storing for winter, and constant maintenance was necessary on the miles of fencing surrounding the property. Xavier worked from dawn until dusk most days, coming home exhausted but satisfied. Despite his workload, he never failed to make time for Jessamine. Each evening, regardless of how late he returned, he would sit with her on the porch or in the library, asking about her day and sharing details of his own. He attended every doctor's appointment, his face a picture of wonder each time Dr. Matthews allowed him to listen to the baby's heartbeat through his stethoscope. As Jessamine's body changed, Xavier's devotion only deepened. He found her more beautiful than ever, telling her so daily and showing his attraction in ways that made her blush despite their months of marriage. You're glowing, he would say, his hand caressing the growing curve of her stomach. So beautiful it takes my breath away. By October, Jessamine's movements had slowed considerably. Mrs. Connolly hovered anxiously, insisting she rest frequently and eat constantly. James watched his daughter with a mixture of joy and concern, often sitting with her in the afternoons reading aloud while she worked on tiny garments for the baby. Xavier became increasingly protective, limiting Jessamine's trips to town and assigning a ranch hand to accompany her whenever he couldn't. His worry made her smile. This strong man who fearlessly faced stampeding cattle and armed rustlers was undone by his wife's pregnancy. "The baby and I are perfectly fine," she assured him one evening as he fretted over her swollen ankles. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time." "Not my baby," he replied, gently massaging her feet. "Not my wife. You're allowed to indulge me a little protectiveness." She conceded with a laugh, secretly touched by his concern. On the morning of November 12, 1877, Jessamine woke to a sharp pain low in her back. She'd been having practice contractions for weeks, but this felt different. When a second pain followed 20 minutes later, she knew. "Xavier," she said, placing a hand on her husband's shoulder as he dressed for the day. "I think it's time to send for Dr. Matthews." His head snapped up, eyes wide. "The baby now," she nodded, trying to appear calmer than she felt. "It may be many hours yet, but yes, I believe so." Xavier was in motion instantly, calling for Joe Taylor to ride for the doctor, instructing Mrs. Connolly to prepare the bedroom, and sending another hand to bring Widow Jenkins, who served as the town's midwife. Through it all, he returned to Jessamine's side every few minutes, his eyes anxious but his voice steady. "Everything's arranged, my love. Dr. Matthews will be here soon. Is there anything you need now?" "Just you," she admitted, reaching for his hand as another contraction began. The labor progressed steadily throughout the day. Dr. Matthews arrived mid-morning, Widow Jenkins shortly after. They examined Jessamine, declared everything to be proceeding normally, and settled in for what could be a long wait. Xavier refused to leave her side despite the doctor's suggestion that he might be more comfortable elsewhere. "My place is here," he said firmly, holding Jessamine's hand through each increasingly intense contraction. James waited anxiously in the library, too nervous to read but unwilling to be far from his daughter. Mrs. Connolly bustled between the kitchen and bedroom, bringing water, towels, and encouragement. As the afternoon faded into evening, Jessamine's labor intensified. The pain became overwhelming, leaving her gasping and clinging to Xavier's hand. Through it all, he remained her anchor, wiping her brow, murmuring encouragement, his face a mask of concern and love. "You're doing beautifully," Dr. Matthews assured her during a brief respite between contractions. "The baby is positioned perfectly. It shouldn't be much longer now." An hour later, as the first stars appeared in the November sky, Jessamine gave one final, mighty push, and their child entered the world with a lusty cry that echoed through the room. "A boy, Doctor," Matthews announced, placing the squalling infant on Jessamine's chest. "A fine, healthy son." Jessamine gazed down at the red, wrinkled face of her child, overwhelmed by a love so powerful it stole her breath. Beside her, Xavier made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob, his hand trembling as he reached out to touch his son's damp head. "He's perfect," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "Jessamine, you're amazing. Thank you for our son." After the baby was cleaned, weighed, and swaddled, and Jessamine made comfortable, James was allowed into the room to meet his grandson. The elderly man's face was transformed by joy as Xavier carefully placed the infant in his arms. "Hello, little one," he said softly. "I'm your grandfather." "We've been waiting for you. We've decided on a name," Jessamine said, watching her father with her son. "James Xavier O'Malley, after the two finest men I know." James looked up, his eyes swimming with tears. "You honor me beyond words, my dear." Later, when the doctor and midwife had gone, Mrs. Connolly had retired, and James was asleep in his room, Xavier and Jessamine lay together in their bed, their son sleeping peacefully in a cradle beside them. "I never knew it was possible to love someone I just met so completely," Xavier murmured, gazing at the tiny sleeping form. "I know," Jessamine agreed, exhausted but too filled with emotion to sleep. "It's overwhelming." Xavier turned to her, his face serious in the lamplight, "But it doesn't diminish what I feel for you. If anything, seeing you bring our son into the world has made me love you even more, something I wouldn't have thought possible." He gathered her gently into his arms, mindful of her sore body. "They mocked you for your simplicity, for your focus on what truly matters rather than superficial things." But that's what I love most about you, Jessamine. Your ability to see clearly, to value truth and goodness over appearance and status. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she nestled against him. And I love you for seeing me, truly seeing me when no one else did. Together, the new family drifted to sleep as the first light snow of winter began to fall outside their window, blanketing the Circle O in a pristine white that matched the new beginning unfolding within its walls. 5 years passed, bringing changes to both the Circle O and Porterville. The railroad had indeed come through, transforming the once isolated town into a bustling hub for cattle shipments. New businesses had opened, more families had settled in the area, and a proper school building had replaced the old one-room schoolhouse. The Circle O had prospered under Xavier's management, growing to become one of the most successful ranching operations in the territory. The main house had been expanded to accommodate the growing family after James Xavier had come Catherine Rose 2 years later, and the twins, William and Robert, just last year. James Jones had lived to see all 4 of his grandchildren born, though his health had declined significantly in recent months. Now, at 73, he spent most of his days in his room or on the porch when weather permitted, watching his grandchildren play with evident delight. Jessamine had not returned to formal teaching, but found plenty of educational opportunities at home. Little Jamie, as they called their eldest to distinguish him from his grandfather, was already reading well beyond his years under his mother's tutelage. Catherine, a precocious 3-year-old with her mother's thoughtful nature and her father's determination, was not far behind. The twins, not yet a year old, were already displaying distinct personalities, William quiet and observant, Robert active and demanding. Life at the ranch followed the rhythm of the seasons: the spring calving, summer grazing, fall roundups, and winter planning. Xavier had built a competent team of foremen and hands who shared his vision for the ranch, allowing him to spend more time with his family while still managing the operation effectively. Jessamine had found her own role at the Circle O, overseeing the household with Mrs. Connolly, who flatly refused to retire despite her advancing years, managing the extensive gardens that now provided much of the ranch's produce, and keeping the accounts with a precision that impressed even the bank managers in town. Their marriage had deepened with time and shared experiences, the initial passion maturing into something equally powerful but more enduring. They still found moments for just the two of them: early mornings watching the sunrise from their bedroom window, late evenings in the library discussing books and dreams, occasional rides across the property to picnic in favorite spots. On a warm June afternoon in 1882, the entire family gathered on the wide front porch of the main house to celebrate James Jones's birthday. Despite his frailty, the elderly man sat proudly at the head of the table, surrounded by his daughter, son-in-law, and grandchildren. "A toast," Xavier announced, raising his glass. "To James Jones, scholar, teacher, and the finest father-in-law a man could ask for. Happy birthday, sir." "Hear, hear," echoed Joe Taylor and his wife, who had joined the celebration along with several other long-time ranch employees and their families. James acknowledged the toast with a nod, his thin face glowing with pleasure. "I'm a fortunate man," he said, his voice weaker than it once was but still clear, "to have lived long enough to see my Jessa so happy and to know these wonderful children." After the cake had been served and the children allowed to run off their excitement in the yard, James beckoned Jessamine and Xavier to his side. "I have something for you both," he said, reaching into his pocket and withdrawing a small package wrapped in tissue paper. "I've been saving this for the right moment." Jessamine unwrapped the package to reveal a delicate gold locket on a fine chain. "It was your mother's," James explained. "Open it." Inside were 2 tiny portraits, one of Jessamine's mother as a young woman, the other a miniature of James in his prime. "I thought perhaps you might replace my image with Xavier's," he suggested, "a way to keep the family connection across generations." "Oh, Papa," Jessamine whispered, tears filling her eyes. "It's beautiful, thank you. And this is for you, Xavier." James handed him a worn leather-bound book, my journal from when I was courting Jessamine's mother. Nothing too scandalous, I assure you, but perhaps it will help you understand where your wife gets her remarkable character. Xavier accepted the journal with evident emotion. This is a treasure, sir. I'll cherish it. James smiled, then grew serious. I need to say something while I still can. I won't be here much longer. Papa, don't, Jessamine protested. It's all right, my dear. I'm not afraid. He patted her hand. I just want you both to know how proud I am of what you've built here, not just this ranch, but this family. You've created something rare and precious. He looked out at the yard where Jamie was helping Catherine pick wildflowers while Mrs. Connolly supervised the twins on a blanket in the shade. Jessamine, do you remember how they used to mock you in town for your simple dresses and practical ways? She nodded, the memory no longer painful after so many years. And do you remember what Xavier said that day in the general store, that your simplicity was what he loved most about you? I remember, she said softly, glancing at her husband, who smiled at the recollection. He was right, James continued. And you were right to value substance over appearance, character over fashion. Look what it's brought you, a man who truly sees you, children who inherit your values, a life of genuine meaning. He reached for both their hands. Promise me you'll remember that. That you'll teach these children that what matters isn't how the world sees them, but how they see the world with clarity, compassion, and appreciation for what's real. We promise, Papa, Jessamine said, her voice thick with emotion. That evening, after the guests had departed and the children were asleep, Xavier found Jessamine sitting on the porch swing, still wearing her mother's locket. Are you all right? He asked, sitting beside her and taking her hand. Yes, she replied after a moment. Just thinking about what Papa said, about being mocked for simplicity. Xavier nodded. It seems so long ago now. Sometimes I wonder what Cordelia Blackstone would say if she could see me now. Jessamine looked out at the prosperous ranch spread before them. Mistress of all this, mother of 4 beautiful children, married to the most respected man in the county. Probably that you don't deserve it, Xavier said dryly. Some people never change their thinking. Jessamine laughed. You're probably right. Though Louisa turned out wonderfully despite her mother. Her letters from college are so enthusiastic. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the swing creaking gently, fireflies beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. Do you ever regret it? Jessamine asked suddenly. Marrying the plain schoolmarm instead of someone more sophisticated. Xavier turned to her, surprise evident in his expression. Regret? Jessamine, marrying you is the best decision I ever made. How can you even ask that? She smiled, a little embarrassed. Sometimes the old insecurities resurface, I suppose, especially days like today when I'm feeling emotional about Papa. Xavier cupped her face in his hands, his eyes intense in the fading light. Listen to me, Jessamine O'Malley. In these 5 years, you have given me 4 incredible children. You've transformed this house into a true home. You manage this household with more grace and efficiency than any sophisticated woman could dream of. The hands respect you, the neighbors admire you, and I, his voice softened, I fall more in love with you every single day. He leaned forward to kiss her gently. They mocked your simplicity because they couldn't understand its value, but that's still what I love most about you, your clear-eyed view of what matters, your genuine heart, your lack of pretense. Jessamine leaned against her husband's solid strength, feeling the last of her melancholy fade away. I love you, Xavier O'Malley, more than I ever thought possible, and I love you, my simple, extraordinary wife. He pulled her closer as the first stars appeared above the circle O. More than all the cattle in Wyoming, she laughed at his rancher's measure of devotion. That's quite a lot. Yes, he agreed, his voice serious despite his smile. It certainly is. Inside the house, their children slept peacefully. In his room, James Jones rested comfortably, surrounded by the family he loved. And on the porch, Xavier and Jessamine O'Malley sat together in the gathering darkness, grateful for the simplicity that had brought them everything that mattered. 2 months later, James Jones passed peacefully in his sleep. He was laid to rest on a gentle rise overlooking the Circle O, where wildflowers bloomed in summer and the sunrise painted the sky each morning. The entire town of Porterville turned out for the funeral, honoring the gentleman scholar who had touched many lives through his daughter's teaching and his own quiet wisdom. life continued its steady rhythm at the ranch. The children grew, the seasons turned, and Xavier and Jessamine's love deepened with each passing year. They weathered difficulties together, drought years that threatened the herd, a fire that destroyed one of the barns, even a brief period when rustlers targeted ranches in the area. Through it all, their partnership remained strong, their family the center around which their world revolved. As the years passed, Porterville continued to grow and change. The railroad brought new people and ideas, gradually eroding some of the small-town attitudes that had once made Jessamine feel so out of place. Cordelia Blackstone eventually moved to Denver after her husband's death, her influence in town fading like morning mist under the sun. Lewiser returned from college to teach at the expanded school, often consulting with Jessamine on educational matters and becoming a frequent visitor to the Circle O. Xavier and Jessamine celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary surrounded by their children Jamie, now managing large portions of the ranch operations. Catherine recently returned from college in Philadelphia with dreams of becoming a doctor. And the twins, William and Robert, inseparable as always though different in temperament and interests. On that special evening, after the celebration with family and friends, Xavier led Jessamine to their favorite spot on the property, a small rise not far from where James was buried, where they could see the entirety of the Circle O spread out before them. 25 years, Xavier mused, his arm around his wife's waist. His hair was silver now, lines of experience etched around his eyes, but he stood as tall and strong as ever. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I saw you in the general store examining that bolt of blue cotton. And sometimes it feels like I've loved you my entire life, Jessamine replied. At 48, her own hair showed streaks of gray, but her eyes were as bright and clear as they had been when they first met. As if there was never a time when you weren't part of me. Xavier reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. I have something for you, not as meaningful as your father's locket, perhaps, but I hope you'll like it. Inside the box lay a ring set with sapphires surrounding a central diamond. To replace the simple band we started with, he explained. Though I've asked the jeweler to incorporate the gold from your original ring into this one. Jessamine's eyes filled with tears as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It's beautiful, Xavier, but you know I would have been just as happy with my plain gold band for another 25 years. I know, he said, smiling. That's why you deserve this, because you never expected it or demanded it. He drew her close, kissing her with the same tenderness he'd shown on their wedding day. When they parted, both were breathless, marveling at the passion that still flowed between them after all these years. They mocked your simplicity, Xavier murmured against her hair. But that's what I love most about you, Jessamine. That's what I've always loved most. And your ability to see the value in that simplicity is what I've always loved most about you, she replied, her head resting against his chest, her heart full of gratitude for the life they'd built together. As the sun set over the Circle O, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Xavier and Jessamine O'Malley stood together on the rise, surrounded by the legacy of their love, the land they had nurtured, the family they had raised, and the bond between them that had only strengthened with time. In that perfect moment, both recognized the simple truth that had guided their journey, that real love sees beyond appearances to the essential worth of a person, and that in such clear-sighted love there is a wealth beyond measure.